And here we are.
La, 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 la.
Hello, everyone. It's Clare Kumar here, talking today to the fabulous, the energetic, the entertaining diversity and inclusion expert, Jess Pettitt. Jess is a master's in education, a certified speaking professional, one of the few in the world. So we are in for a treat. What we are going to be talking about today primarily is the topic of being good enough now, which is also the title of Jess's book. And so I'm thrilled to welcome Jess here. Jess has a diverse history. So as a Texan, she believes in, riding two horses at one time. This comes from her deep Texan roots, one based in humility and the other one based in ego. And that has something to do with a career as a stand-up comic and also a diversity and inclusion expert. So I can just imagine what your stand-up was like, because I've seen Jessica present on stage with hundreds of people in the audience, and she had the room riveted. So if you ever get a chance to hear Jess speak, don't miss the opportunity. But right now, I would love to dive into a really juicy conversation with Jess to explore not only good enough now, but if it's okay with you, Jess, I really want to start where we are today. We are June 8th, and this is exactly 2 weeks after the death of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And it's percolated to the top, to the forefront of everyone's consciousness in North America and all over the world, this sense of an appreciation for diversity, which clearly has a lot of opportunity to do better. As a beige person, I have my own experiences with this. And I just wonder if you could touch on that, of your most salient thought now that you'd like to share with leaders and people working in the corporate world, and even entrepreneurs. What should people be thinking about now in this time?
So it's a very key question. And first, just thank you for having me here, right? And the murder of George Floyd, for some, is an awakening. The language I keep hearing is like a cracking open. And for others, it's another state of exhaustion, because they have been saying and experiencing, and we have been collaboratively doing very similar things for a very long time, expecting different results. And I'm all for different results. I think it's also important to honor and name all of the people who have been murdered due to police brutality within these 2 weeks, or even within the same 24-hour period of George Floyd, because black trans woman was murdered and not getting any media attention. A black woman was murdered in her own home while sleeping.
Yes.
And not to detract from George Floyd either, but the real focus area is on police brutality and racism in a system that is based on racism. And so to your question, what should people be thinking and feeling about, is the main thing I've been saying is a problem does not have to be a problem that you have experienced in order to exist as a problem.
Right.
Problems can exist that you didn't even know about, right? And so taking a moment and noticing what happens when you feel entitled to know all of the problems, and you also may feel entitled to fix all of those problems. The fixing and the knowing is really coming from a place of privilege that might be well-intentioned, but well-intended fixing and knowing is not actually helping. So well-intended helping is listening, providing space, donating money, read a book, have a conversation with someone. Don't burden people who are already burdened, and do your own work, right? And ultimately, that is what good enough now is about doing that work. What does that mean?
Thank you for saying that, because my next question to you, and thank you for that, because your advice and recommendations there, because watching the community of people I know, which has people from all walks and all colors, all places, that's what's bubbled up. It's about introspection and awareness and a tuning in, and then acting. So thank you for sharing that. I did want to say, well, how do you make this bridge for being a diversity and inclusion expert? What made you write a book called Good Enough Now, which is talking about our own journey?
Yeah, mostly my burnout, is what did it. So the language that I like to use is I used to do terrible, horrible, really ineffective diversity trainings. And I noticed zero change in my audience, zero change in me, zero change in what we were doing. And similar to this kind of awakening that some people are having, and some people are like, hello, wide awake over here. I realized that I too was doing more of the same and expecting differences. And none of those differences were happening. So, what if I did something different? And step one of kind of doing something different is I quit. So, I was going to quit. And I was burnt out. I was exhausted. I could not imagine doing the work that I care and love about so much again. I just couldn't imagine.
Wow.
So, I still had 6 months of work on the schedule to like muster through while I was having those feelings. So I said, I either have to quit or I have to figure something out. And one night, late at night, in some Best Western somewhere, I realized I don't actually have any other monetizable skills. So I usually brag that I know how to fold a fitted sheet, which you and I can bond over this, right?
100%.
But not entirely monetizable. I don't get to do
I
organizing
tried.
and working place for home. You've made the whole thing. I don't dust. I don't own a label maker. I just know how to fold a fitted sheet. I'm not in Claire's world yet. But I did say yet though. So I can't quit. Well, now if I'm burnt out and I can't quit and I'm going to have to do something different, what am I going to have to do? And I believe in every civil rights movement that has ever existed, and every sociological experiment that has ever existed, and in every time I have ever been scolded by a mentor or a parent. Those three things are not necessarily directly related. However, the pattern, step one, is listen. So in that 6-month period of time where I did not want to be doing this work, I listened to my audiences. And my audiences would come mostly usually in the conversations afterwards, right? But they would tell me why they couldn't do something, why they could, like why they weren't good enough to do something, why they couldn't have that hard conversation, why they couldn't ask for a promotion, why they couldn't challenge somebody on social media, or why they couldn't get past a sordid history with a sibling. They would tell me why. And in telling me why, you know, as a motivational thing, I'd be like, oh, you're good enough now. You can do it, right? So then the feedback that I was getting in evaluations kept using the words good enough now. And I kept listening for patterns. And eventually the Twitter, I don't know if you're familiar with the Twitter. I am new to the Twitter, but it was certainly then was new to the Twitter. But the Twitters would happen. And so then I started doing a qualitative analysis, pulling from my sociological background. And do the best you can with what you got some of the time is something I say without even knowing I'm saying it in most of my work. And so then between being good enough now and doing the best you can with what you got some of the time and listening to people make excuses as to why they couldn't do pretty light struggles to very large struggles, I realized, one, I have a model, two, I have an idea, three, I am staring at research, and in my language, I'm a very head action person. And so then as soon as I realized it would click and solve a pain point that crappy diversity trainings don't, I couldn't help it. And the book out of me. And then I did another 6 months of work and came back to this draft that I don't know what that author was thinking of. And I kind of rewrote it all. And then even now I'm going through the process of the second edition and I'm having heated conversations with the author. But it worked.
I can imagine what that looks like. And well, there's a lot of patience in there. First of all, introspection, creating something, and then being brave enough to come back and look at it, dissect it, and rework it again. And it speaks to the evolution we have as people because our lens is shifting as we're learning. I had a phone call this morning with an organization I'm hoping to do some work with, and I said, "Look at me Thank you.
Hire Claire. Hire Claire.
Look at me as your partner. It's a live webinar series that we'll do first because I want engagement. And I said, look at me. What's your feedback process? Because I want to understand what the feedback is that's coming, because I want to make this organic so it stays relevant to the issues. And as we learn more from the people that we're working with, because it's all about how to be more effective in this time as leaders and as contributors, then I want to be the teammate that keeps co-creating with you the right thing, or as best as we can do to serve. And so continually evolving and tuning into that is kind of doing the best with what you got, right? So,
and some of the time, right?
yeah.
So like, I know we're going to talk a lot about perfectionism,
Oh,
but there's so many adverbs that come with perfectionism
yeah.
that prevent us from being curious, generous, authentic, and vulnerable, because we're not perfect. We don't know how to plan for the outcome. We can't set it up so that X, Y, and Z happen in alphabetical order at 7:10, right? Like, so we just opt out. And you can't opt out because, like, I often say the bumper sticker, you might be familiar with coexist. It's like a blue bumper sticker with
I'm not.
coexist made out of religious symbols.
Oh,
Coexistence is not a goal. That's occurring right now. We are you're late.
yeah.
Planning on coexisting.
Stop aspiring. You're already there.
That's happening. So all the things that you're like trying to become tolerant of, the language you're using is you're trying to get to a place where you're willing to coexist with it. Yeah. Speed up. Like we're at tolerance, maybe even acceptance, and possibly some celebration. Like, this is the line. Could you please realize that your life matters, and your action and your thoughts and your positive and negative bias are deeply relevant to your realm of influence in order for any change to happen. So how are you going to do that? And I believe you can do the best you can, and believe they are too, with what you already have, instead of waiting for external resources to come at you. Occasionally is better than never doing it at all.
So what I'm hearing in that is, don't expect it all the time, because that's too much pressure, because no one is going to be able to do that all the time. Right? That's why I don't think shame is a motivator, because no one can. If we start throwing stones and saying, well, and just holding our performance up there as something to aspire to, every single person has done things they're not proud of. Everybody has made mistakes. So where are we going to get with that? So I love the do the best with what you can, and expect to achieve great things some of the time, and other times you're going to fall off the horse, whichever one you're riding, and you have the courage to get back on and keep going, because that's all we can do to keep moving forward and evolving.
The two horses, when I say ego and humility, what's important about them is that, so like I, like you, run my own business, right? And so we are always playing the comparo game, whether we like it or not, or want to admit it or not. So if you're on the ego horse too long, then basically what you've been doing is writing copy for your own marketing materials, right? Because you're amazing and hire me now. It comes with a ShamWow. But if you're on that horse too long, your close friends are like, could you like dial that down a bit? Like, that's annoying. Knock it off. Like, turn your microphone off. Like, could you just speak and be a normal person? The flip side is this humility horse, where like, well, I know nothing. Like, it's almost Buddhist in nature, right? Like, the more I know, the more I'm aware I know nothing. That is true. Could you please parallel park already? I want to get out, right? Like, yes, but I must be humble to the learnings. Yes, I know, but I have to pee, and now there's someone honking at us, right? Like, the humility horse is not where you write marketing from. The humility horse is where you do learning from.
Learning, yeah, exactly.
But if you only stay in a humility horse, then you also become annoying and apathetic, and you displace responsibility because you're not enough.
Well, and you may not be enough for your clients to trust in you to give them what they need. You have to be in a place of confidence in what you're offering. To even partner curiously, you have to be in a place of, I can be a good partner on this journey.
Right. Once you're on two horses, then each horse will check the other one to make
You're
sure
not
you're
going
not
to do
being
the
fortuitous.
Jean-Claude Van Damme truck thing where you're like the horses are splitting apart and you're in big trouble now. That's all I kept picturing is how do you keep your horses together? you know?
Oh, I picture some kind of water creature situation where there's like someone with the horses swimming in the water. That's what I
Oh,
picture.
oh, I like that. Oh, I'm thinking of Versailles and the fountain in the friendly garden. There's horses and water. Anyway, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this, but the Jean Claude Van Damme thing did not feel good. So we'll come, bring those horses back, keep keep it together. No, but the thinking is rich, right? Because we're all in a journey, and we want to stay in that place of evolving and not beating ourselves up.
Mhm.
And staying in this not annoying, arrogant, just the dial it down
Yeah,
place and the staying in the
because
place.
what happens, like so when you're talking about beating yourself up, what
Hmm.
happens is you're focusing on the wrong piece, right? So when I often tell a story about quitting smoking, so anyone watching this who is smoking, you should be quitting anyway, but that's judgment from me. Yes, yes, it is. So when I would quit smoking, many times I have quit smoking. What I would do is say, okay, I'm no longer smoking cigarettes. Done. Not smoking. And would tell everyone, etc. And then I have some like large burrito for lunch and I'm halfway through a cigarette after the burrito before I even notice I'm smoking. It's called a habit. I'm
Hmm.
not consciously smoking.
Hmm.
I just ate a burrito, which is immediately followed by a cigarette when you smoke. So I'm halfway through a cigarette and now I have quit quitting.
Yeah.
Well, I have failed.
Yeah.
Now I'd be back up to 3 packs within minutes, probably, because I have failed failing. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So flip it around. If I normally smoked 3 packs a day, which those of you that don't smoke is 60 cigarettes, which is my average when I was quitting smoking, that's 60 cigarettes. So if I had one after a burrito, that's 59 I didn't smoke. I haven't quit quitting. I haven't failed at failing. I've smoked a cigarette. Like, have some perspective. But that's where that perfectionistic stuff can come in, is that we get to this all or nothing, right? So, like,
Hmm.
I'm not racist because I have friends that are not white. Okay, great. Well, let's talk about how even tokenizing your resume of friends is actually something that only white people can do, which could actually have a racist impact. So maybe stop giving me your resume of your glass menagerie. Tennessee Williams already wrote that story, right? Like,
Hmm.
can you be both at once? Yes.
Hmm.
And you're
Hmm.
focusing on the wrong thing.
Hmm. Interesting. So I want to dance into an example of my own perfectionism, which when you look at someone who's organized, there's a strong chance that there's a need to control for a lot of reasons, the
I
environment.
think that's a Venn diagram that's pretty perfect.
So, so part of it I know comes from needing to calm the input to my nervous system. That if things are visually too chaotic, it's stressy for me. So I need to dial down that noise. But then I would find myself starting a notebook and wanting the underlining or the printing to be just so. Or and if it wasn't, I'd be erasing it. This is why I love these pens because they're erasable colored ink, right? So it's like there there is, and I guess everybody's on here that can on the continuum somewhere. What can we just talk about perfectionism and what it is and just to understand that a little bit? There's some anxiety involved, there's unrealistic goals, there's a pressure, there's an expectation, there's all kinds of stuff in there. What's going on in us?
I mean, I the only thing I can come from is my own experience,
Mm,
and there's um there's a lot of really good research out there before we get to my own experience, which also speaks to like I can't voice my own opinion without giving somebody else's opinion first to validate my opinion. I'm working on
mm,
this. But good research nonetheless, is that when you have survived trauma,
yeah.
very likely the survival mechanisms of feeling safe and prepared after surviving a traumatic experience, let alone multiple traumatic experiences,
Mm,
will result in perfectionism, people pleasing, control,
mm,
things like that. And I think it's probably
mm,
tied to emotional intelligence, so kind of like reading the room and figuring out what to do and how to make it better and how not to make it better.
mm,
I also think that, at least for me personally, it has very much helped me identify when they're wrong. so then I know to put up a boundary so that I feel more safe and prepared. Like perfectionism in my world has served me quite well in feeling safe
Mm.
and prepared. It has not necessarily served me having authentic relationships with other people well. And depending on where I am in a given moment, and I mean, we're 2 weeks after George Floyd's murder. We're 19 weeks, 19 years. I don't know how long I've been sheltering in place, way longer than I thought. So my emotions and my experiences are kind of on a roller coaster, is the metaphor everybody's using. So it's happening and ebbing and flowing at the same time.
Well, yeah, just touching on that, where we kicked off the top with is that where we are 2 weeks after this crisis upon crisis. Part of me thinks that we were that crack and opening was there. So perhaps people are feeling more deeply because there's a rawness in this experience that we haven't endured before. And so we're open, we're sensitive, we're feeling. And I tend to think that this is going to invite a depth of change, not only on in terms of racial interaction, but also on what I'm hoping is greater respect for humanity in general, which is kind of my core drive professionally, is to see that really be embraced in the corporate space. For the sole reason we'll get more and more people invited to contribute. Then when we're contributing, there's reciprocity, we're more fulfilled. It's just we can get more people at the table. So I'm hoping that there's a real opening because of the crisis. Somebody just said never waste a good crisis. There's an opportunity in here. So I hope we're sort of dancing in that now, as uncomfortable as it is, that we'll be going through and evolving.
Yeah, and it also can, I think, me understanding my perfectionism or my attempt of overcoming it, which I should also mention is sometimes like a blatant disregard for any kind of quality, right? So like, look, I'm not being, no, you're like a hot mess that other people have to deal with. Could we reel that back in? Like some quality control is not terrible, right? Like zero and all of it usually aren't. But I
Right,
think
right.
for me, when I start noticing, and I like you keep using the word the dance, right?
Mm,
Is that there are unanswerable questions. Why would he do that? Why would she say that? Why would they have responded this way? Why didn't they respond in any way at all? Like, for me, the dance I have with myself between zero quality control and like really under allowing my like, you did a good job here, could you please relax, that helps me with what I believe my therapist refers to as empathy,
mm,
in trying to figure out, like, if we take the police officer, for example, who obviously had his knee on George Floyd's neck, which resulted in George Floyd's murder.
mm,
And let's just take the 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, that George Floyd had already died.
mm.
He'd already been killed, and the police officer's knee is still on his neck. So there's a part of me that like just shuts down. Like
Yeah,
I don't even know how to do. So for
yeah.
me, if it's beneficial, when I'm having this dance, what could have been going on, right? And so like, I have never been a white man. I have never been a police officer.
Mm,
I don't know. But in this moment, as someone who was not directly impacted by police brutality, this particular incident,
mhm,
etc., it
mhm,
is an exercise that I feel I can do
mm,
to find out what could be happening.
mm,
And I wonder if it's a classic kind of example of how like masculinity or power is going to somehow get you out of a situation
mm,
where maybe you've realized you have made some very bad choices that have dominoed you into this exact moment.
mm.
What are you going to do right now in this moment? Which I think led to the frozen behavior, because you're waiting for these other systems of oppression of others, your systems of privilege, to get you out of a sticky wicket. Right now, calling this a sticky wicket, I already know. What are you doing, Jessica? But I'm trying to use this as an
I get
example of
you.
understanding what happened,
Well,
instead of just being paralyzed and stifled by, I don't know, I would never do that. Maybe I
well,
would.
paralyzed and stifled, or going to immediate judgment and shutting down an openness of thinking. And so it's interesting. One of the things I did this week which was a really emotionally upsetting week, being involved in conversations and doing a lot of listening, participating in some conversations successfully and others not so successfully. One of the things I did was I reconnected with a fellow I went to high school with who, because he's on one of my friends' walls, was talking about this. And he's a former police officer who did training of officers. And being curious, trying to stay in curiosity, I think is you can't be closed if you're staying genuinely curious. And my question to him was, what about the other officers that were looking at this? What about that? And what could be going on that could make it okay, or possible, not okay, but possible for that experience? So I spent an hour on the phone with him. I'll have him on again later, because Iron Will DP is his handle. And it was amazing. He was and I thought, boy, I think I'm early out of the gate inviting the other side of this, potential other side, when it's just another human being in this situation, but another perspective in. But I wanted to more broadly understand what's going on, what's the realm of possibility. And it was really, I don't know, really helpful to me to hear his perspective, someone who's trained hundreds, if not thousands of officers to go out and put a smile on someone's face every day, and to make that their mission every day is to be injecting that kind of sort of optimism and care for the community. And very different than what we're seeing, and to hold on to the breadth of humanity that's at play in these situations. So
yeah, and no pun intended. Excellent choice of words, right? But what I would add is that when we are talking about humanity, we don't get to handpick the pretty parts, right? Humans have been utterly despicable to one another, historically speaking. That's not new.
Yeah.
You paying attention or having some like unsettling images enter your life, or patterns of behavior that you have been saying, hello, this is existing in a quiet, silent echo chamber of no other additional responses. All of those things are true right now. Right. And so if this is some kind of great cracking open, the things that I'm noticing that seem to be different now, I believe is because we're sheltering in place, quarantined. The importance of facial recognition, or being able to read lips, or what it means to smile in your eyes when you're wearing a face mask. There's a different level of humanity that some of us have experienced in a way that felt very new and fresh, that is now leading very repetitive problems to feel very like new. Whereas these are not new. Nothing new is happening.
Right.
What we're going to do about it, hopefully, will be new.
Yeah. All right. I want to move now into talking about the book and the model that you've created that helps us look inward to then be, more helpful contributors to this kind of conversation going forward, and in this community and way of living that we'll have. So Good Enough Now is the book and the model, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So I think what's important is if we pull from you'll never dismantle the master's home with the master's tools. Now I just blanked. Is that Toni Morrison? I think it might be Toni Morrison.
I don't know.
I will Google that, or someone on Facebook Live, I'm sure, is about to fact check me.
Do you know what? While you do that, let me see if I can't pull up it's going to make a noise, and then I'm going to make it go quiet. So hang with me 1 second, because then I'll see if there's any comments, and just invite the people that are with us on Facebook Live that I will check back here before we wrap. Let me just mute us now. Okay. See?
And I also have it up, so it's been nice. It's mostly your friends saying how much they love you, and people laughing at my jokes. And Kathy.
Shush. Are you shushing? You're not shushing. There we go. I think I shushed it. I think I did. Okay, awesome. Now I can think again because if there's some other noise and I'm no good. There are a few comments, no lukewarmness. Okay. So there's a few people joining us, which is awesome. And so just to invite those friends that are there, please feel free to ask a question and I will check back and either for me or Jess, while you've got a chance at this brilliance here, please feel free to ask a question and I will. And I'm looking at the screen, which of course makes no sense. Please ask a question
Yeah.
and I'll check back in. All right.
Well, no worries. So the idea of the model. So often when I was doing bad diversity trainings, right, is I specifically as a white woman was doing most of the trainings through my empathy, I'm using air quotes, and understanding that came in from my subordinated identities, right? So whether I identify as a queer person or whatever place I was doing the work motivated from my subordinated identity place, primarily with most of the people in the audience coming from a dominant identity place. So for example, if I identify as an LGBT person and I would be doing a safe zone training primarily to make straight people be nicer or nice just generally to not straight people, right? So then we talk about homophobia, biphobia, transphobia. So it was kind of that dynamic. But people were coming externally to gather the vocabulary, words, and the resources, nurture them, rub on them, maybe they would feel better. So that's part of what I think I needed to dismantle in itself. And when we take that quote, the reason why I think it is so important is that I am also needing to dismantle or unlearn my unconscious bias as well as my conscious bias. I also am responsible for the patterns that I need in order to feel safe or to feel prepared, which could be wildly wrong, but I need them to feel safe and prepared because that's what I've learned from my own life. So the tools that I can use is my own life. So my lived experience is the best tool I have. Now, fun fact, it is free and already available to you. Ah, who knew? And every second that you are living, you're getting more tools. So it's just like showing up and you get all the answers.
A living lab.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
if you can learn your lived experience and how it has taught you to be, then you can use your lived experience and join with someone else who you then give space and grace because you believe they are using their lived experience. Now you can have a conversation, right? Like ultimately, that's the dismantling that I did to survive my own burnout. The idea of good enough and now briefly, because I know you have more questions and you didn't come to a TED Talk, but is the idea of good is the idea that I do not think, and this is a very weird thing to say, and I'm still in an argument with the author, but I do not believe that every living human is living a good moment right now. I do believe somehow that every human is trying to be good. How they are being good and what they are being good at, there's a couple people that I really would like to sit down with what are their value systems. But for the most part, I believe it is safe to say that even if you happen to maybe resemble an orange chip that I think has gotten a very bad rap because it is one of my favorite snacks, I believe that your life has taught you that this is what you do to feel safe and prepared. And I see it more and more and more when someone that I largely disagree with is the responses are just like, what? Like, it's so baffling and confusing to me. But if I take all the things that are baffling and confusing to me, there is an order. There is a pattern that makes sense. And I believe that people's lives have taught them to respond this way. And if that's true for them, that's true for me. Okay, so that's kind of what good is about, is understanding what are those patterns, how has my life taught me to be, etc. Enough is stop gathering. When we're all part of a group and one of the most common white fragility defense mechanisms is for people to, our privileged fragility, it doesn't just have to be whiteness, although that has been up, is this long resume of all the pain and suffering that they have survived and been resilient through. So there's like their damage report, right? But their damage report is falsely doing two things. One is, look, see, I'm damaged, so I'm not enough, therefore absolved from responsibility. but also, look, see, I'm damaged.
Mhm.
Therefore, I couldn't be responsible for causing pain. And it's a false argument on both sides. Thank you
Mhm.
for over disclosing way too much about you and causing more people pain by disclosing those things as a reason as to why you couldn't possibly cause people pain. That is
Your
like the go-to.
disclaimer, if you will.
Right.
Right?
That's a go-to move. So
Right.
what if you just are enough right now?
Mm,
As much of a hot mess, lukewarm or not, as much of a hot mess right now, what if you just work with how you are right now?
mm,
Which then gets to now, which is pretty self-explanatory. What the hell are you going to do? So,
mm. The action piece.
mhm. Or inaction. Sometimes don't do anything, right? No, you do not have to forgive every single person. You do not have to reach out and invite everyone to virtual happy hour. But you need to know why you are or you aren't. And that's the now piece.
There's a lot to digest in there.
Yep.
It makes me think of my word of the year, which is intention.
Ah,
So,
very
which
good.
has a lot to do with now, sort of understanding where we are with good and enough is like, okay, what's the intention here? And do I have to do anything is a very good question, because there's a lot of times now where simply observing and listening is enough.
Yes,
It's
and
an appropriate.
grammatically, those are verbs, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
observing is a verb, listening is a verb, doing is a verb, leaving your house is a verb. I ain't leaving my house. That is a verb.
You know what the interesting thing is there? Nobody knows. So if nobody knows and can acknowledge these actions, do they matter? Yeah, they do. But and you have to be. This is me taking on my what happened in my week and kind of processing with you.
Yeah, knock
I
it out.
think because things that happened, I didn't have to be validated in those choices for them to be meaningfully good choices for me. And yeah, they didn't have to be assessed by anybody else. So yeah, interesting. Hmm.
And I would also say, so I know Jeffrey Shaw was watching earlier, but Jeffrey Shaw has a really great podcast called Creative Warriors. And
Yeah.
in doing so, just let's just take podcasts as an example. You're also a great example of this. So I made a goal when the book came out to be interviewed on a podcast every week. And I like podcasts. I don't have my own, but I wanted to practice talking about what it is I'm doing in different settings, support the medium, etc. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up doing about 162 podcast interviews in a year because people are flaky and I say yes to everyone. And of the 162, I would say less than 5 had done any prep work. Like I had to tell people
Really?
not to call me Jennifer. I had to tell people, yes, in fact, I do have a book, which is why I'm on your podcast. What a great idea. I should write a book. Why am I doing this? So, Jeffrey Shaw was the very first podcast I was on where he was way more prepared for our interview than I was, right? Which, if once you know him, that's not a surprise at all.
No.
But what was exciting about that conversation was the intention that you're talking about, is how I believe you then really get to tap into your creativity, your innovation, and use the time and energy that you have to
Mm-hmm.
do the best you can with what you got some of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's built in to making the choice about what are you actually going to do. And what you are actually going to do can also involve doing nothing. But you've
Mm-hmm.
now taken responsibility for what it is you're doing. Great. Now you can be creative. Now there's like a foundation. Now you can fight for what you believe in and prioritize what you need to do because you have made a choice that is intentionally based on what you're claiming responsibility for.
Yeah.
If we just did that, not only would I have no job security, but I think we would dismantle every system of oppression because every
Yeah.
system of oppression is directly tied to a false claim that you know what you're doing, which gets us back to the 2 minutes of what are you doing. I think the only place of empathy I have consistently landed is that somewhere he knew that he had made a large domino of very bad choices, and the second he stands up, his life is going to forever change.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still alive. Right? In that moment, I think it took him 2.5 minutes to realize there's no way out. No one's going to rescue you. You have done this. You are
Yeah.
now responsible for this. And then that is when, and he's still alive.
Mm. I'm trying to formulate where to go from here because there's so much in this. I want to bring it back to what someone can do now in this situation for themselves to be more comfortable with exploration, be more comfortable understanding who they are and how to navigate through this, evolution to a new reality. What would be your advice if you were going to be talking to somebody now, besides read the book, which is um, rich with stories. It's rich with commentary and thought from a lot of different people, and layered on your own experience as well, and an invitation for introspection. So anybody who's interested in furthering on their journey, that's great. But if somebody has, they're right now thinking, what would a good next step be for someone right now to take?
What's exciting, I think, about self-reflection is it's free and it takes almost no time and energy to do because we're already narcissistic and self-absorbed, right? So if you are interested in kind of a homework assignment, right? Is
Mm.
it, even now, like I am able to string together very funny things and very serious things together. It is a skill set that gets me invited to no parties. But if I'm going to be doing this, then what you can be doing while you're watching this, right, is just take sheltering in place. So you find out that things are going to be different than you expected a week ago. Go back to that moment. What was your go-to move? Right?
Mm.
I immediately made lists. Look, this is the first notebook. I immediately made lists. And I immediately was very upset that I wasted an entire notebook because I dated it all the way to the end of April because that's how many pages were in it. And I was very sad that I wasted a whole notebook. So here is April, May, and June, and goes to the end of July. I don't know how long we're going to be here, right?
Mm.
But what my go-to move is I provide structure for myself where there is no structure. Okay, that's being self-aware.
Yep.
Does that annoy people? Yes, that's why I've been fired from every job I've ever had. Well, there's an epiphany. Okay. So then providing structure where there is no structure, and now I'm self-employed. How am I going to do that? Now I'm dealing with a paradigm that is built into my go-to moves instead of my go-to I wish I did this moves. Right?
There's action embedded into.
Right. This
Right.
is evidently what I do. When you tell me
Right.
that I just lost all of my business and all of my known income for 2020, the first thing I did was grab a journal and make a calendar. Why was that it? I don't know, but it was.
Yeah.
So instead of judging it or wishing it was something else, this is just what it was.
So to notice the things, to draw on what's worked for you before in a period of uncertainty, and tap. It's one of the things I say a lot is tune in before you lean in, and so it's inviting that retrospection, that self-awareness, to tune into those things that bring you some comfort, and then
Or make where
experiment.
you are uncomfortable into a scenario that you are comfortable with. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Mm.
there's a parallel skill set here, right? So I call my book a Trojan horse diversity training. And it's because if I lead with the diversity training, then some people are like, I don't need that. And some people are like, no, because they've been to my bad diversity trainings from before. So what good enough now simply is how did your life teach you that this is what's important?
Right.
What do you think's important? Tell me more about me, about myself. And then now you know which pieces you are doing to make you feel safe and prepared that you have to keep.
Yeah.
I'm not judging
Yeah.
you based on your choices. You have made those choices, but now you can be responsible for them. There's the stuff that's wildly incongruent. So now you know where to focus on, like developing or learning or unlearning. And then there's this floating middle bit that is wildly incongruent with who you are and makes you feel safe and prepared. And now you're more aware of how you're showing up to other people and who is showing up to other people, because we often lead with the impact of those incongruencies. But now you're at least awake for the show, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is diversity work. This is social justice work. It just starts with how fascinating that the first thing I did was make a list.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's this big point about understanding others is going to come from being more tolerant and understanding ourselves, and therefore we can stay in a place of compassion and openness to what others are going to bring to the table, and not be so quick to condemn, quick to judge, quick to close down.
And the condemnation and judgment goes to ourselves and to others as well.
100%.
Same skills, whether it's facing out or facing in. So
Yeah.
usually one is a little bit more comfortable. So on some topics or across some
Yeah.
power dynamics or some identities, we'll tear ourselves up first.
Mm-hmm.
And other identities, other situations, other power dynamics will tear them down first.
Yeah.
All right, well, why don't you just be responsible for what you do first when it's this, and what you do when it's first when it's this? Isn't that a fascinating pattern? Do you want to keep that pattern?
Right. Now, what would you like to do with it? Now that
Right.
you're aware, awareness is the beginning of everything. And it's quiet work, right? This work is very quiet. And I think largely in society, when it's running full tilt, we don't have a lot of peace or time or energy that we devote to that. So grabbing a journal and letting thoughts come out is really effective in uncovering what that is. Tuning into dreams when you wake up and staying in that moment to figure out what's coming up, and also digging in. I mean, I had an interaction this week on Facebook, and I was really uncomfortable about it afterwards. And I thought, okay, Claire, just sit here and be all squirmy inside, because this is actually how you're going to get to something. I don't know what, but stay here and face it.
Right.
And
discomfort is alive.
Yeah.
Okay. Who are you to think you get to be comfortable and organized and alphabetized 100% of the time?
Right.
Like I often talk about, like, people will tell me, like, well, I just can't do anything. I'll just go live in a cave. Well, first off, there are people who are already living in a cave, so maybe check and make sure someone's not already living in the cave you had your eye on. Number two, because that's called gentrification and or failed attempts at genocide, a different workshop. If you're going to go pick a cave that is currently unoccupied and you have permission to be there, great. Then your Aunt Mildred is going to be mad that you missed their birthday party because you didn't have good Wi-Fi signal inside the cave. Like, this isn't about removing yourself. And it isn't about making yourself so uncomfortable that you're absolved from discomfort or causing discomfort. Recognize that we do. I tried for so long. I thought, like, I'm a diversity trainer. I am not doing anything bad because have you seen my resume? My business cards say I'm amazing. Yeah, that is not a good font. So instead of, like, I know all the vocabulary words and I have the complete cable package and this cabinet of very diverse friends. Therefore, no, don't do that, because look, no. What you need to do is, I'm going to try to engage in a better connection with you. And engaging with a better connection, there is a very good chance this is not going to go the way I intend. Okay. Well, I'm now going to engage in a connection with you with that as the risk. And the payoff is the impact on our connection, which either got better or worse. So when we say, like, intentions matter, intentions are really one-sided. And most of us say, well, that's not what I meant. When we really meant, we didn't really think about what we said, and we're not really sure what we mean. But that is not what we mean, largely because we just got told that thing was a bad idea. But if you didn't think enough about what you were actually saying in the first place, you can't claim what your intentions were. Regardless, you are responsible for the impact. And sometimes you have the privilege of being told that there was an incongruent impact. Sometimes you don't. And out of respect, when you call people out, like, hey, pay attention to this thing because I respect you as a person, I'm telling you this, instead of talking about you behind your back or just not mentioning it or just logging off or unfollowing or whatever. There's a space of respect that you've asked for. And if you get defensive to it, you're not listening to it. That's what those connections mean.
I've seen that all kinds of ways this week. All of a sudden, it's interesting when there's a fueled discomfort, anger, if you will, tension, and there's a lot of emotion coming out that there's rightly potentially space for. But what I noticed was a lot of monologuing, not a lot of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so personally, I was feeling like I need to be part of conversations because I'm going to learn in dialogue. I tend to shut down when somebody's monologuing at me, and my interest in listening diminishes because there isn't. I'm a big questioner, and so I need to be able to. I guess I need to be able to ask questions as part of my process that keeps me safe and secure in learning. If I can't ask questions, I'm like, this isn't my place. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, so for me, I had to sort of set a boundary and go, well, this isn't a place that I'm going to learn because I don't feel safe here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting observation, but bumpy and a bit painful in that process. It was stingy. So, but sort of, it's interesting because I left a conversation and then I came back to it because I respect the people. And I thought there's something for me here to learn. But do I choose to want to stay in this environment? No. And that was a lot of noticing to be able to come to what can I positively take away from this? And
Mm-hmm.
is it something I think is healthy for me to stay involved in? Or am I going to be too depleted and I need to set some boundaries for myself right now? Maybe not always, but right now, this is what I need. And that was an interesting, a little bit draining, but an interesting one to come to. And I'm
Yeah.
appreciative of it now. At the time, I was like, well, I don't that. And this is the moment I'm not liking the dance, but,
Right.
sticking with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And for me, the big turning point when you asked what seems like I'm talking too much a long time ago of like, why did you write the book? It was a sentence from Courageous Conversations that every sentence has a history.
Ooh.
And so written sentence, spoken sentence, typed into Facebook sentence, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's not intentional or you didn't know what you were doing or you're just talking off the top of your head or whatever, just whatever. It was informed by a lived history
Yep.
that you either can or cannot be responsible for. And in
Yep.
my opinion, it's the lowest bar imaginable to be responsible to your own life. Not
Mm.
anybody else, just your own life. Just like call me a libertarian. Do it. Enjoy it. I'll stand up. I'm not a libertarian. But if we are only going to do party of one work,
Mm-hmm.
can we work on being responsible for who and how I am as an individual in this world, in this life, this turn? Just that little piece.
That's all you get to control. That's
Some of
really in
the
this.
time, have you met me? I can put on the cute little workout outfits. I can put the little discs in, and I still sit on my couch eating chips, watching a workout video, right? Like,
I get you.
but
I
I
get
do have
you.
more control of myself than I have of anything else.
Yeah, but there's got to be a commitment to investing in that. And that's part of self-love. It's sort of a brave self-love to be in there. I don't know. I guess if you have a fundamental belief as I do that we're here to have the best journey we can, and in the best journey it's giving as much as we can to other people, and through the giving we're receiving. That's and because I would love to think that reincarnation and I can have another life and I can have another shot at this and I'm going to evolve, but I only know about this one. So I want to make this one fulfilling for me and to serve others because it's all connected. So,
Right.
yeah. Man, I could talk to you all darn day. But I loved that every sentence has a history. You said it's from the book Courageous Conversations.
Right. So I have them right over here because they're on speed dial for me. But these are the 4 books that I read when I was trying to cure my burnout. So, Crucial Conversations, Difficult Conversations, Fierce Conversations, and Courageous Conversations. And
Wow.
what is interesting is all of these books very much talk about what, in my language, is a conversation that matters.
Mm,
And most of their work applies to you and me, Claire, having a conversation, an A and a B.
right.
And sometimes there's an observer or a third party person. And so then the communication piece that's in my book is that I want you to have a conversation that matters with you
Mm-hmm.
because there is an observer. right? So if you don't have a conversation with yourself, this observer sees that. They
Mm.
know. They know who you are. You are playing catch up to what they already know to be true about you. So do your own work, right? So that was the kind of communication shift as to
Mm.
why this is not about vocabulary words about other people or tasting food or watching a movie with subtitles. That's called diverse exposure, which is
Mm.
great. Knock yourself out. Enjoy Netflix. It's almost limitless. What this is about is having a raucous conversation with you and how you have turned out the way you have turned out without blame and without judgment, but with full report. Full report of this is how I've turned out to be. Where did I learn that I
Yeah.
needed to provide structure where there is no structure?
Mm.
I now have done enough work that I remember the moment when I realized no one around me is paying attention.
Mm.
Somebody needs help. Is anyone making dinner? Right? Like what is happening? Right? So somebody needed to like fly into action and have so when I am really pushed, the first thing I do is provide structure.
Mm.
To myself, largely also to other people. They don't enjoy that part. It's called micromanagement, but whatever. That is what I do. That is my go-to. But if you care about me and you see me in like high structure mode, I am not good, right? Like that is my like first rung of defense. So
Mhm.
what's second? What's third? How
Mhm.
much of this comes from my dominant identities and how much of this comes from my subordinated identities? I talk about there's an exercise, there's lots of activities in the book. I
Mhm.
talk about crucible moments and what have taught me how to be me, right? So in the book, there's empty space, and I try really hard to share my learnings along the way of what I've been doing. One, I'm a keynoter, so I do like a good story, but if I'm willing to be vulnerable and you're willing to be a little vulnerable with no witness, then the least I can do is guide you through these activities, right? So
Mhm.
that's why I created the book club. That's why I put the activities in the book. That's why there's handouts. I don't care how you want to access it, but whatever you
Yeah.
can do, if George Floyd or any of these other folks or whoever is next, unfortunately, to be murdered at the hands of a racist system, if you want to use this time to do
Mm.
this work is not outside of you. Even if you identify as a person of color, even if you identify as a police officer, if you identify as a police officer of color, all of these things are true. And in there is a human. And that human matters. That human's life matters.
Mm.
And you owe it to yourself to be responsible to do your own work of how and who you are showing up as. That is no longer a shitty diversity training. That is good enough now.
We're gonna end right there because that was incredibly powerful, and I can't like that just puts a bow on all of it. Do your own work now. What I want to do is give you an opportunity to share. You mentioned the book is being rewritten as a second edition, and you're starting a book club. So, can you give just a little bit of an idea of how people can find you and where, and tell me just a little bit more about this book club piece?
Yes. So first off, good enough now, uh, goodenoughnow.book.com. I always stumble on this. You are welcome to pre-order a second edition. I am still in raucous conversation with the author. I don't know what she was thinking, but we're working on her. The edits, I just got an email while we were on this, is that all of the edits are approved. So that's
Yeah.
very exciting. So the second edition will be coming out shortly. It also have an audio book, etc. First edition is still fairly good, just has some spelling errors in it that this head a detail-oriented person couldn't stand. Second edition also is going to have book discussion questions, that kind of stuff. So goodenoughnow.book.com.
Okay.
And then I'm currently, in light of what is happening, there is a lot of wording out there of like, come for your cousins, white people. What are you doing about your own white work? And I really do believe that I can hold a space specifically for people who are relatively new to the conversation about who they are, which is a
Mm.
very weird thing on a meta level for someone else to like invite you to the stranger of yourself, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to open up a book club where my ebook is going to be free. So you don't even have to buy the book if you don't want to. If you want to, feel free. But we'll walk through the 5 different sections of the book together, have discussion questions, and then go through the book. You won't have to disclose anything you don't want to disclose, but I'm leading you through the process of really beginning to do your own work. So that'll be coming out hopefully this week, maybe next week at the latest. And that'll be at goodenoughnow.com/club, I think. And then I obviously am Jess at Good Enough Now, and I'm happy to help in whatever way I can.
Amazing. A heck of an opportunity. So thank you. I've learned even more about you. Yes, exactly. Here it is. Is it going to still be this funky, beautiful orange that I love to bits? Yeah. Yeah. I know. I saw it. I'm like, yeah. And I love it. It's how doing the best we can with what we have is better than nothing. Right? So do the work. Check out Jess in all the places. And if this speaks to you to do this introspective, deep development work, it will only pay off in creating better community for everyone around you. So I want to thank you, Jess, for joining me for this conversation. I am going to just check in over here on Facebook. I see some thank yous, some amens, some wonderful comments for people, but I'm not thinking I don't think I see a question. So I think with that, then I will let you go on to whatever is left in this beautiful day, and just with the most sincere gratitude for spending this time with me and sharing this invitation to do the good work.
Well, I appreciate it. An invitation is my word for the year. So look at that.
All right, then. Consider yourself invited, everyone, and have an incredible rest of your day also.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks, y'all.